Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Today I want to show you some history and reasons why the Sikhs have such a strong tradition with firearms and weapons, and why today it is so essential that we as Sikhs preserve this tradition and train with firearms, train with weapons. Now here you can see in this photograph a depiction Guru Gobind Singh Ji, our 10th Satguru, with a musket. And this shows just some of the history that Sikhs have with weapons. And you can see all of his men are armed there too. Now, Guru Gobind Singh Ji told us to not come in front of him without weapons. Today, there was an article in a Sikh media, Sikh NNN, which talked about gun control. And they talked about my lawsuit that I filed on March 13th. It says here, but one Sikh disagrees with them on how to defend the defenseless. So I realize that many Sikhs, especially in the United States, support these gun control measures that are being considered in Congress now, that Obama has put forth, President Obama has put forth, which put limits on assault rifles and semi-automatic weapons, high-capacity magazines also. My feeling is that we as a country have gotten away from training people with weapons. And when I was growing up, there were classes and junior clubs with marksmanship and shooting. And it was just natural that when I became a Sikh, that I followed through with these traditions. One of the reasons I think that many Sikhs have gotten away from the traditions of the past. Here you can see Sikhs fighting proudly for the Allies against the Nazis in World War II, carrying the Siddhi Guru Granth Sahib. One of the reasons I think that Sikhs nowadays have gotten away from this is because there was such a disarmament of Sikhs by the British in India, and then also further disarmament of the Sikhs by the Indian government. Even though tradition of training with weapons, training with firearms was such a history of Sikhs, like I said, the Indian government, because they want to disarm Sikhs, have promoted this idea that it's not politically correct to train with weapons. So we don't want to let this history of the Sikhs go by the wayside. Here you can see an article by a Sikh scholar talking about the different weapons and history of the Khalsa, Baba Deep Singh, and talking about how we are to respect weapons, train with weapons, keep shastars of all types. I would further encourage Sikhs to look into marksmanship programs in the United States and elsewhere, where you can further, Sikhs can further this history. Here it says here, the sword, the saber, the scimitar, the axe, the musket, the shaft, the rapier, the dagger, the spear, these indeed are our saints. So as you can see, there's a strong history, and unlike that article today in Sikh NNN, implying that I'm only one Sikh who believes in this. I think that many Sikhs do. Now here you can see my history. My father was in the Marine Corps, the United States, for 14 years, and he was at Pearl Harbor when it was attacked by the Japanese, the USS Nevada he was on. So I have quite a history of military and weapons. This is my mother shooting a pistol here back in the early 1950s. And back then, it was very common to have marksmanship programs. Now here you can see Sanchar Nail Singh Bhindranwale, who was martyred at the Darbar Sahib, and Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister at the time, attacked the Darbar Sahib, the Sikhs' holiest shrine there, killed and martyred all these men of Bhindranwale's. And I spent time with him in 1982 there, and I saw that him and his men were very devout. They do lots of seva there, and unlike many people accuse him of killing people, he was very devout. But that's what I saw in 1982. He spent his time there at the Darbar Sahib and doing seva, doing service for the Guru. Now again, you can see my history here, where I was in military school, grew up with weapons and military service. So it was only natural that I tried to continue this service of training with weapons. I graduated eventually from this Harding Military Academy there in Glendora, California. And here I visited again just a few months ago and met some of the previous owners, and who were all into weapons and training with firearms and defending our country, defending our families. This was a picture in a newspaper before I'd become a Sikh, so I'm not wearing a star there. These are pictures of when I tried out for the Olympics. Now, what goes along with this idea of training is, I mentioned this before, joining junior marksmanship programs. And in the United States, we used to have such a great program for training juniors and shooters. Now it's really dwindled to almost nothing. And here you can see the old club I used to belong to back in Southern California. And then I later tried to get in the U.S. Army too, which was unsuccessful because I was wearing the turban and beard of the Sikhs, and I was a Sikh then. You can see where I tried to get in the U.S. Army. So there's been this discrimination against Sikhs in the U.S. Army and also in the United States. I'd like to encourage the U.S. government to allow Sikhs again to be in the U.S. Army. I think that it would have saved a lot of problems, especially with this shooting that happened there in Wisconsin, where 6 Sikhs were murdered. If Sikhs had been allowed in the U.S. Army, I think that this person, Michael Wade Page, who murdered the Sikhs there, would have been able to stop that. That if he knew Sikhs there in the Army, he would have been able to know who Sikhs were. So we need to do a lot of training in this United States with junior shooters. We need to educate people about who Sikhs are. Here I am in a Jeep I used to have when I grew up. Now like I said before, I've filed a lawsuit against the state of California, asking that we can have weapons to be able to protect ourselves, assault rifles, semi-automatic assault rifles. I think that would have been effective in many of these shootings that took place at that school in Connecticut, if somebody had been armed there and ready to defend the school and the children. I also wrote a book here, published a few months ago, which tells my story, and people that are interested should look this up. It's Confessions of an American Sikh. It tells about my history with firearms, history with becoming a Sikh, what I went through in India also, there where I was arrested on false charges. And I unfortunately witnessed the Punjab police, how corrupt they were and how they tortured people there. So I have a little bit of experience, although I know that Sikhs went through so much in India, and they still do, with the corruption of the police there. There's a new movie out called Sada Haq, which I recommend people watch. This tells a little bit about the persecution that Sikhs have been under by the Indian government. And again, we need to train with firearms so that this type of persecution doesn't happen again in the history of Sikhs. The Indian government has taken arms away from Sikhs, and for those that live here in the United States, I hope that you will start to train again with weapons and start to get back to our history and our traditions of weapons. Now here's a video I made talking about self-defense, and I'd like you to listen to some of this here. Probably won't be able to listen to the whole thing.
Today I'm going to talk a little bit about self-defense with handguns and other weapons as a result of all of these terrible shootings that have been happening in the United States. Now especially it's important to realize and to understand that we need to take measures to defend ourselves and our families with handguns in the wake of these horrible shootings that happened at the elementary school there in Connecticut. Now, it's a fact, unfortunately, that our society has these deranged people in it that have access to guns. And before I talk about how we can actually take specific measures to protect ourselves, I want to talk just a little bit about why this may be happening in our society. I listened to some of the news reports and to some of the other accounts of the shooting, and it seems that this young man who did the shootings was part of a broken home, and I suspect there was no worship of God or other spiritual things that were happening in his family. I have to research that some more. But my observation here in our American society is that all of these things will not change until we come back to worshiping God and to come back to the proper moral values that we should have in our families and in our society. So all of these things like global warming and other problems that we have, I believe, will be immediately solved once we get back to worshiping God and we get back to proper values. Now let's talk a little bit about the specifics about how we can protect ourselves in the meantime with firearms. I encourage people to go get a concealed weapons license. Usually, in most states, you can get these through your local sheriff's office or department. I just recently attained a concealed weapons license through the Sutter County Sheriff here in California. And I have to say that it was a very good process. I've been around firearms since I was 11 years old, and I learned a lot myself about how to do self-defense and the laws concerning self-defense and where you can and cannot carry a concealed weapon. So you're very close to the person that you're trying to stop.